Welcome to Restoring Education in America with Priscilla Rahn. She's a master educator and author, leading the conversation to restore the American mind through wisdom, virtue, and truth.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Restoring Education in America. I'm your host, Priscilla Rahn, and I'm so excited that you've decided to join me in the conversation today. I have a very special number one guest today. His name is Mr. Darren Rahn. And how are you, Darren?
I am good. Surprise, surprise. Good to see you.
Yeah, surprise, surprise. And people would say, like, who is this person? Well, this is my beloved, my betrothed, Mr. Darren Rahn, my awesome, amazing husband and spiritual leader. And as I was thinking about the topic of education, I thought about you because we've had many conversations about your education journey. And I thought the world needs to know your story. And so for those people who don't know who you are a multi-Grammy nominated #1 Billboard artist. At the moment, you have 29 number ones on the Billboard and multiple top 10s, top 30s, and wonderful placements of your music all over the world. And you got your start, your big break, producing for Wayman Tisdale, Ain't No Stopping Us Now, which I remember, I think went #1 for 9 weeks. Did I get
Something
that right?
like that.
Something like that. But we've had many conversations because I'm a teacher, a music educator. You started your musical journey in elementary school. So I want you to start at the very, very beginning, talking about your musical journey because it's so fascinating.
Well, you know, it really completely ties into the whole arena of education because music for me started when I was in school, in grade school, and that carried me through my junior high and high school years, and then into college where I got my degree in education, music education. And that was kind of the leaping point from there to even when I got into the music industry. And, you know, one thing that really struck me, the time that I spent in teaching and continue to teach people and share the craft and the trade with others, is that when you have to teach someone what you do, it's just about the best learning and training tool you can have. Because it's one thing to know how to do something. It's a whole nother thing to be able to take that and put it into words and action and share that with others. And so I think for those that are in education, and even those, if they've taken their education and gone elsewhere, you never really get away from it. It's always a part of what we do.
So you are originally from Canada, British Columbia. You were born in Banff, a beautiful part of Canada, and your dad decided to go into seminary and ended up in San Diego while you were in grade school. And then eventually he got his first pastoralship in the San Luis Valley.
Southern Colorado.
Southern Colorado. And you made your way here. And tell us about your journey into you're a saxophone player, but you didn't start out as a saxophone player.
No, I mean, saxophone was always my dream. And when we were real young, my mom said, hey, you guys, we're going to have each of you kids take piano for 2 years. And then, you know, when you're done with that, if you want to continue, it's fine. And if you don't, that's okay too. We just want you to have that foundation. And so at 5 years old, took 2 years of piano lessons. And the highlight of that 2 years, by the way, we had a piano teacher who babysat the Queen's piano. So in British Columbia,
I was going to say, okay, which Queen?
The Queen, Queen Elizabeth. And
okay.
they were gold engraved Steinway pianos. I think there was 1 or 2 of them, and I think at the end of our lessons we got to play on the Queen's piano, which she babysat. I guess the Queen had, I don't know why the piano was in Canada, but it was. anyway, that was kind of the highlight. Enjoyed the music, but didn't connect at that moment with the piano. But what happened was a few years later, when it was time for band, um, my brother and I decided we were going to join. So he joined on trumpet, and I wanted to play saxophone. And we went to the music store, and they said, "No, your fingers are too small." And so I said, "Well, then I want to play the drums." And my parents were like, "No, no drums, it's too loud." I said, "Well, then I want to play the trombone." And they said, "Your arms are too short." And so the beginning of my wind instrument uh, time was on clarinet. The guy that owned the music store said, you can move to saxophone when your fingers get bigger, which was a lie. They had too many saxophone players. They needed some clarinet players. So I took up the clarinet, and in all honesty, didn't really like it that much. So in junior high, they had an opening in the jazz band for baritone saxophone. And I jumped at the opportunity, anything to get off of the clarinet and get onto the instrument that I wanted to play. So at the
Now,
time,
pause. A baritone saxophone, for those people who don't know, is huge. And if you're in middle school and you stand next to a baritone saxophone, that baritone saxophone is likely bigger than you.
yeah, so I was a year younger than everyone else in my grade, and I was small. So at that time in my life, it was as tall as I was. So I would prop the baritone saxophone up on a phone book. When I started, not even a book, I just set it on the ground, sit on a chair, and start playing it. But yeah, that's how badly I wanted to move from the clarinet to the saxophone. I would roll it to school on a skateboard. I don't know, maybe a mile and a half, and anything to get off of the clarinet. And to this day, um, yeah, I can't say that I'm not proud that I don't play much clarinet anymore, but I'm really happy to be on the saxophone. It's the instrument I always wanted to play.
I mean, but what you're saying is where there's a will, there's a way. And if there's
Mhm.
something that you want to do there, you can do it. Because I know as a band teacher, as a beginning music teacher, I have students who give me all kinds of excuses as to why they can't take their violin home or their flute home or some little, even their alto saxophone. And I think, man, you can take it home. You're on the bus and you get dropped off really close to your house. So I do remember
Mhm.
that story. So you ended up graduating from Alamosa High
Mhm.
and going to Adams State, which was not called Adams State at the time.
I was Adams State, but it
Oh,
was
it was
college. Now it's
Adams.
university.
Oh, okay. So now it's
Yeah.
Adams
Mhm.
University, but Adams State, majored in music education.
Music education for my bachelor's degree. Yeah. Yeah. Did
Wow.
my degree in my student teaching, and then went to get my master's and part of a doctorate at the University of Northern Colorado in Greeley.
But wait. Okay. I went to school to become a music performance major and I switched to education.
Mhm.
You went for
Mhm.
education and then switched to performance.
Yeah, for me, it wasn't a degree switch; it was a career switch, obviously. But I had planned on, I thought maybe I was going to be teaching, and then, at some point during my education years, I felt called to get into music creation, and that's what really guided me. But it all stemmed from education. I mean, even those early years on the Barry sax in junior high, it was there was no saxophone teacher. I had a baritone saxophone and a fingering chart, and I had to figure the rest of it out. And so initially was self-taught, and then most kids start out with the saxophone lessons. I was the opposite. I was self-taught until college, and then in college, I was able to get under the direction of a couple of really good instructors to really fix the problems and teach me the physics of saxophone.
Well, that was before YouTube. If you were to tell me today I was self-taught, I would have thought, oh, you just went on YouTube, took some free lessons. How did you do it back when you were learning how to play the saxophone?
It was basically a fingering chart and figuring it out. Yeah, there was no formal instruction at all. that first bit of time on the baritone sax was a shocker. Took a lot of air to make that horn vibrate. But I loved it. I mean, from the get-go, I felt a real connection with the saxophone as an instrument, and I loved the bigger instrument. It would really vibrate. You could not just hear the harmonics on the horn, but you could feel it. You could feel that metal resonating, and yeah, I just connected with it.
If you're tuning in, you're listening to Darren Rahn, a multi-Grammy nominated #1 Billboard artist, saxophonist, and record producer. Darren, you have produced for so many great names. Dave Koz, who we love. Right now, you're on tour with Brian Culbertson, a 4-week tour. You're in a different city every night, which is why we're doing this interview. And I thought, you know, your life is so amazing. And I tell my students, you know, if you would just sit and practice, you could create such a great tone. Mm-hmm. And maybe you never know, you could become a great musician like you did. And tell us about those early college years where, you know, your friends were probably going out and enjoying college life. What were you doing instead?
I was in the practice room, and the time was split between the things I had to do, which were long tones and scales and building my sound. But I always took time. I think that's probably why I spent so much time in the practice room. Was I didn't just want to practice scales and long tones. I wanted to make music. And so I would do kind of the precursory things that, you know, the long tones and the developing the embouchure and the breath and the sound, so that then I could then spend time practicing what I wanted to practice, which was making music and making sounds come out of the instrument that connected with my soul. And then I think I had one person in early in college, a professional, that had given me advice, and he said, Darren, if you want to be a part of this conversation musically, you need to have your own voice. And at the time, I took it kind of hard, but I took it to heart. There's a time when we're learning, when we're being educated, where we have to practice and we have to imitate and we have to assimilate. But at some point, we have to take the skills and the knowledge we have, and we actually have to convert it into our voice. For me, that was music and saxophone. And so making sure that what was coming out of me was real and it was true and it was authentic to me. It wasn't just a cheap imitation of someone else. And so I think when we talk about the importance of education meeting reality, this, I think, is one of the things that the great educators do. They find a way to connect the technique and the learning methods with, hey, now we have to put this to use. How is this going to connect with people in the real world? So for me, that was a real pivotal moment.
Yeah, I know. When I used to teach high school choir, I had a lot of really talented vocalists who wanted to be singers, right? Their goal was to like be on The Voice or do something big and record. And they would emulate other artists. And we've talked about this a lot, where young musicians, they try to sound too much like somebody else instead of, to your point, finding their own voice and having something to say in the conversation. When we first met, I didn't listen to a lot of jazz, and there would be times you would say, oh, we'd be out, oh, that's my music. And I didn't know your sound early on, but then I grew to know your sound. And then I grew to know, oh, that's Dave Koz. Oh, that's Najee. Oh, that's Brian Culbertson on the piano, right? Like you can tell the quote unquote voice of the artist because they've developed it musically. And it's, when you hear the nuances, it's such a cool thing. Mm-hmm. And, but that's something that you have to work on. You first start out emulating people that you admire, learning some of those basic skills and learning the chops. Like, you've listened to some of your quote unquote idols in music growing up, people that you admire, and some of the things that you do play, I hear in some of the traditional jazz artists, some of their ways. But you spent the time early on doing the fundamentals, which is creating a sound. When I listen to you play and your softs and your louds and your articulation and your technique, it is so skillful, which is no surprise as to why you're one of the top saxophone players and producers in the world. And I chuckle because, it's like, oh, what time is Darren getting up? Yeah, whenever he feels like it, you can get up, be in his PJs, go downstairs, get a cup of coffee, and when he's ready to go downstairs into the basement, into the studio, he can work, and then he can take a break and take a bath. And now you're, this life that you've built because you did the work early on, affords you this amazing life where you can travel all over the world. You have catered meals. You're in some of the best musical venues in the United States with some of the best food catered. And I think, what an amazing life that you have built because you were disciplined with your education and you worked hard. It didn't just come overnight. So what would be your advice to a young person saying, how do I get my big break? What do I need to do? What would you say to them?
Well, I would give to them some advice I was given many, many years ago. But before any of the big opportunities had presented themselves, I was just focused on doing things well and doing them with excellence, and wanting God to be glorified through the music and the work. And so, but years ago, I had a mentor tell me, Darren, don't ever look for big doors to open. Just always go through the small doors. And when you do it for God's glory and do it with excellence. And that's what I did. The opportunities came as a result of that. I mean, some people have, everyone has a different story, but I think the ultimate goal of education is self-expression. And if you don't learn the basic tools, you can't ever get to self-expression. You'll only ever get to being a poor imitation of something, or fall short of the true goal of self-expression. And when we look at what God created us to do, it's to glorify Him. And every person is unique, so your voice should be unique. And if you don't put in the time learning the basic foundations and tenets of whatever it is you want to do, it doesn't matter whether it's music or science or math or English or art or theater, if you don't get past the basic tenets of just accomplishing the basic stepping stones, how are you ever going to get to a point of self-expression or original creation? You look at an Einstein, he didn't say, I don't want to learn 1 + 1 = 2. How are you going to ever crack scientific theories if you're not taking care of your basic mathematics? These people were not only uniquely gifted and brilliant, but they took their gift and they developed to a point of discovery and expression, which is really a reflection of who God is. He's unique. He's we can't even fathom all that He is. We see it in creation. We see it in things like music. But that didn't happen without thought. It didn't happen without intention. And so neither will the developing of our gifts. We really, it takes a lot of time, but yes, the payoff, to be able to say, several decades later, wow, I can wake up today when I want, and then I can work hard. But it's not a free ticket. This. Being self-sufficient in the gifts that God has given you generally requires a lot more time than most people will ever put in. If I had started in my college years just saying, I'm just going to work 8 hours a day and call it quits, I would have never been able to reach the level of freedom that I have now. I'd say I probably put 2 to 3 times the effort and time into music than maybe more than a lot of my friends. But the ultimate result was, yeah, self-expression and some really cool freedom too.
My special guest today is Mr. Darren Rahn, multi-Grammy nominated #1 Billboard artist, jazz saxophonist, and record producer, and my husband and spiritual leader. And you are brilliant. You're brilliant. And when I think of us being made in the image of God, part of that image is the fact that he's a creator. And when we look at Bloom's taxonomy, the top of Bloom's taxonomy is creation. Okay. And so, at home, I call you Wolfie after looking Amadeus Mozart, because if you saw that movie, you would see just the mind of his process for creation. And it's just brilliant. And when I'm upstairs and you're downstairs in the studio and I can hear the music coming out of the studio, I think, oh my goodness, that's amazing. I cannot believe that is coming out of your brain, right? Out of your, and I said, how does this like kid from Canada, from a farm, German Mennonite, have so much soul? And you always say, it just comes from my heart and it comes from God. And it's true. I think for those of you who are creative types, it is a special gift. It is special wiring. It is brilliant. Not everybody has that gift, and you're able to crank out these hits over and over and over and over. It's just something really remarkable to see, and to even hear your journey, that where you've worked hard and kind of luck meets, you happen to be at the right place at the right time, or God opens a door. You've been self-employed your entire time as a businessman. You've had to learn how to manage your business account. You've had to learn how to manage contracts. By the way, you're brilliant at contracts too. You've had to manage your time and negotiate every part of your career to where you are. So it's not just, oh, I play saxophone, I love playing saxophone, but it's like a 360 comprehensive knowledge that you have grown to develop. And one of your dear friends, Wayman Tisdale, was a big part of your journey. What's something that you learned from Wayman before he passed?
We would talk often about musical things, and I'm a very deep thinker, and so sometimes maybe even an overthinker. And there are times where that's really good, but Wayman would always tell me, if it feels right, it is right. Don't overthink it. And understanding that oftentimes when we're creating, it's very common for the most honest things to come out of you first, even if the ideas aren't necessarily refined, even if they're not ready for prime time. Oftentimes they're the purest, most honest forms of expression that come out of us when we're, it's spontaneous, it happens. And before we start trying to hone it and fix it and correct it. So he taught me not to overthink. And then he said something that I think was life-changing for me, and I think for anyone in education, in the music industry, in any industry. One of the key things that he told me early on, he said, Darren, he said, you need to remember to always stay in your lane. Don't try to be something that you're not. And I took that to heart. Everyone has a different personality. I'm a little more reserved, and I'm a little more quiet and not quite as outgoing as some. And so for years, I thought maybe I had to be a certain something to make it. And the truth was, all I needed to do was be who God made me to be, and to do it with excellence for his glory. And it was incredible to watch. And I will say too, that teaching is probably the most powerful learning tool. I grew up, when I was in school, I had 2 teaching assistantships. When I did my undergrad, I had some, they were called work study, but it was actually more of an unofficial teaching assistantship through through my 8 years in college. So the last 2 years I was in high school, and the eight, and then more time, about 12, 13 years of my life was spent teaching students, teaching saxophone and clarinet and flute, and even for people that didn't play saxophone, teaching jazz improvisation. And having to convey those concepts and those ideas to students took me to a whole nother level musically, because it forced me to understand things from multiple angles. It's one thing to know a fact that 2 + 2 = 4, but it's a whole nother thing to take two and to figure out all the different ways you can get to 4. And so teaching really made me a much more complete artist as a musician.
Well, I can't believe we're out of time and we need to land our plane, and you have a very fancy tour bus to get on to your next show destination. Where can people find you? What's your website?
They can go to darrenrahn.com. That's DARRENRAHN.com. And they can hit me up on, Facebook or Twitter or X.
I don't know if you have any more room on your Facebook to accept friends.
The artist page is good.
Oh, the artist page, yeah. The artist page. And check out his music on any of your favorite streaming platforms, Spotify, YouTube. What are the others? I mean, those are the main ones.
Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, wherever you listen to music.
And if you still have a CD player, you can go to his website and buy a CD, and he'll even sign it for you. Well, my sweetheart, I'm so proud of you. And I know everybody is enjoying your music, and you are just sharing your gift with so many people. And you just, get some rest, stay rested, and get up and get ready to entertain the masses.
Thank you, sweetheart. I'm glad to be on your show, and good to see you. This is the first time I'm seeing you in 2 weeks?
Well, to my listeners, catch me next time. And remember, educating the mind without the heart is no education. So seek wisdom, cultivate virtue, and speak truth.
Thanks for tuning in to Restoring Education in America with Priscilla Rahn. Visit PriscillaRahn.com to connect or learn how you can sponsor future episodes to keep this message of faith, freedom, and education on the air.